They chose the same human, and the kingdom's fate was sealed. Part 1. The Selection. The great hall of the kingdom stood tall and cold, built from a metal that never rusted and stone that had been carved by machines 3,000 years ago. The walls reached so high that the ceiling looked like the sky of another world. Light came from panels that had no visible source, making everything look equal and clear. Today, the hall held more power than any other place in the 12-star systems. The council sat on their raised platform, 12 beings who had made every major decision for their entire civilization. They were not the oldest species, but they were the most logical. They had built an empire through careful planning and clear thinking. They did not believe in luck or fate. They believed in mathematics and strategy. They believed that the strongest choice was always the choice. Today they gathered to select a new royal protector. This was not a small job. The royal protector stood next to the queen of a woman named Lyra who had ruled for 40 years. The protector's job was to keep the queen safe from any threat. Over the past 500 years, no queen had been hurt. No threat had gotten past the protectors. The 4 species stood in the great hall, waiting their turn to present their champions. The delegation stood on the left side. They were large beings with 4 arms and green skin that looked like armor. Their champion was named, and he was the strongest warrior in the military. His arms were thick as tree trunks, and his eyes were fixed ahead, never moving. Had fought in 47 battles and had never lost one. The warriors stood in the middle. They were tall, 7 feet or more, with gray skin and eyes that seemed to see everything. Their champion was named, and he had trained for fighting since the day he was born. They believed that combat was the highest form of art, moved like water, smooth and quick. He was 300 years old and had learned how to use every part of his body as a weapon. The Xenos delegation stood on the right side. They looked more human than any other alien species, but their skin had a blue tint and they were very tall and thin. Their champion was named Saren, and he had powers that could not be explained by normal science. The Xenos were born with abilities inside their minds. Saren could feel thoughts before they happened. He could see danger coming before it arrived. In tests, he had stopped threats that other species did not even know existed. Then the human delegation walked forward. There was only one human in the group who could be a candidate. His name was Dale. He was 42 years old. He had gray hair at his temples. He had no visible weapons and no obvious signs of strength. He wore a simple gray suit that made him look like someone who worked at a desk, not someone who would stand next to a queen. Was the human ambassador to the kingdom. He had served in this job for 6 years. He knew the laws and the customs and the language, but he was not a warrior. He had never been trained in advanced combat. He had no special abilities. The council looked at him and then looked at the other 3 champions. The choice seemed obvious. "Who represents the human delegation?" asked the head of the council. His name was Taurus, and he was the oldest being in the room. Walked forward slowly. His footsteps were the only sound in the vast hall. Everyone watched him move. He did not look nervous, but he did not look confident either. He looked like a man who was doing something he had already decided to do, no matter what anyone else thought. "I do," said. His voice was calm and level. "I volunteer to be the royal protector of Queen Lyra." The council made sounds that were like laughing, but not quite. They did not think was funny. They thought he was being logical by presenting a candidate, even though the candidate was obviously the wrong choice. The general did not even turn his head to look at. He did not think there was anything to see. The warrior studied for a moment. He had learned to respect all fighters, but he saw no sign of fighting skill in. He looked away. Saren, the Xenos champion, stopped for a moment. His psychic senses felt something, but he could not understand what it was. It was not a power. It was not a skill. It was something else. He tried to push his mind toward it, but the feeling slipped away like water through his fingers. "The human candidate is accepted," said Taurus. "The selection ceremony will begin tomorrow. All 4 protectors will be tested. The strongest will be chosen." That night sat alone in his room in the diplomatic building. The room had a window that looked out at the city of The buildings were all made of the same metal and stone as the Great Hall. Everything looked organized and clean and empty of feeling. Did not sleep. He opened a computer and looked at files that most humans would never see. He looked at patterns in the Council's decisions over the past 2 years. He looked at how resources had been moved between different systems. He looked at who had spoken with whom and when and how often. The pieces began to form a picture, not the picture that the Council would see, but a different picture, a human picture. Understood something that the four warriors did not understand. A true threat would not come from outside the kingdom. It would come from inside, and it would come from someone who was supposed to be trusted. He stood up and looked out at the empty city. Tomorrow, they would test strength and power and ability. Tomorrow, they would test all the things that made each of the four champions seem like the obvious choice. But already knew what was coming. He had seen it in the patterns. He had read it in the movements and the words. And he knew that when the real test came, it would not be a test of power at all. It would be a test of something much simpler. It would be a test of whether you could see what was really happening when everyone else was looking in the wrong direction. Went to bed that night knowing that the Council had made a choice they did not understand. They had accepted him as a candidate thinking he was weak. But they had also, without knowing it, chosen the one being in the entire kingdom who might be able to stop the danger that was already moving like a shadow through their halls. They chose the same human, and the kingdom's fate was sealed. Part 2: The Trust. The selection trials lasted for 3 weeks. Every day, the four champions were tested in different ways. They were tested in combat against machines and against each other. They were tested in speed trials where they had to move through complex obstacles. They were tested in mental challenges designed to measure their ability to stay calm under pressure. The general won every physical test. His strength was so great that he broke 2 of the testing machines by simply being near them. He could lift weights that the other 3 candidates combined could not even move. His body was built for war, and the tests showed it in every measurement. The warrior almost matched in the physical tests, but his real strength was in speed and balance. He moved so fast that the cameras used to record his movements could not keep up with him. When he fought against other warriors in the testing area, he never lost his footing. He never fell. He moved like someone who had thought about every possible way a body could move and had spent centuries perfecting each one. Saren, the Xenos champion, did not seem to use his body much at all. Instead, his mind worked in ways that the other champions could not understand. In tests where they had to predict threats, Saren saw them coming seconds before they appeared. When they tested his ability to sense deception, Saren could point out lies within the first word. His psychic powers were so strong that the Council had to design special tests just for him. Did not win any of the strength tests. He did not come close. In one test, lifted a weight of 2,000 pounds, could barely lift 50 pounds. In the speed tests, moved across the obstacle course in 12 seconds. Took 3 minutes. In the mental tests, Saren could identify false statements with perfect accuracy. Got only 60% correct. But did something that the other 3 candidates did not do. He did something that made the Council notice him in a different way. After each test approached the other champions, he talked to them. He asked them questions. He listened to their answers. He studied how they thought and what they valued and what made them afraid. The first real conversation happened 3 days into the trials. Found standing alone in the training area after the combat tests. Was cleaning his weapons, preparing for the next day. "You are strong," said. It was a simple statement. Looked at him. "Yes, and you are weak." "Yes," said. "But I have been reading the Council's decisions for the past 2 years. I have been looking at how they move resources and how they make their choices. I have found something interesting." Stopped cleaning his weapon. He looked at directly. "What have you found?" Someone on the council is taking things, said. Not money, not resources, but power. They are moving themselves into positions where they control important information. They are making decisions that benefit only themselves, and I think they are planning something big. Said nothing for a long time. Then he asked, "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the real threat to this kingdom will not come from outside," said. "It will come from inside. And when that threat appears, the council will need protectors who understand what is happening. I think you understand things that I do not. But I think I understand some things that you do not. We might need each other." Went back to cleaning his weapon, but he nodded once, a small movement that recognized as agreement. The second conversation happened 5 days later, found in the meditation room, a place where the practice their fighting forms. Watched him move for a long time before speaking. "Your technique is perfect," said. Stopped moving. "Then why do I feel like something is wrong?" "Because you feel it too," said. "I have talked to your people. They tell me you are worried. You feel a change in the council. You feel like someone is lying, but you cannot prove it. You cannot see where the lie is coming from. Turn to face. The way is to fight what we can see, but you cannot fight lies. You cannot cut through them with a blade." "I can help you see them," said. "I have been trained to find patterns in information. I can show you where the lies are. You can show me how to be ready to fight when the truth comes out." Was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Very well, I will listen to what you have found." The hardest conversation came with Saren. Knew that Saren could feel thoughts and sense danger. It would be harder to convince him without full honesty. One night went to the place where Saren liked to rest. The Xenos champion sat in a dark room, his eyes closed, his mind reaching out into the spaces around him. "I know you can feel something," said. "I think you have felt it from the first moment we met. Something that is not a power and not a skill, but something else. I am asking you to trust that feeling. I am asking you to help me, even though you do not understand why yet." Saren opened his eyes. "Humans are strange," he said. "You are not logical, you feel and then you act. But you are also honest in a way that other species are not. I can feel your honesty. I can feel that you believe what you are saying." "Will you help?" asked. "Yes," Saren said. "I will help, but I will also be watching you, Dale. If I feel that you are lying to me, I will stop." "That is fair," said. In the remaining weeks of the trials, something changed. The four champions began to meet in secret, shared everything he had found. He showed them the patterns in the council's decisions. He showed them who had been meeting with whom. He showed them the flow of resources that did not match the official records. The champions began to understand. They began to see the shape of something dangerous forming in the shadows. And for the first time, they began to see each other not as rivals for a single position, but as people who might need to work together. When the final day of the trials arrived, the council announced that all four candidates had performed with excellence. They said that the decision would be made within 1 week. They said that the new protector would be chosen based on all the tests and all the observations. But knew the truth. The real test was just beginning, and it would not be a test that the council had designed. It would be a test that and his three allies had created together. They chose the same human, and the kingdom's fate was sealed. Part 3. The conspiracy unfolds. The conspiracy had been building for 2 years. 2 members of the council had decided that the old ways were not working anymore. They believed that the kingdom needed new leadership, leadership that was not bound by the traditions and the laws of the past. They believed that they were the ones to provide this leadership. Their names were was an older council member who had served for 300 years, was younger but had risen quickly through the ranks because she was intelligent and ambitious. Together, they had a plan. They would take control of the military through the selection of the new protector. If they chose someone loyal to them, someone who would do what they said, then they would have the power to make the council listen to them. But they had made a mistake. They had believed that was the right person to control. They had thought that a human, weak and new to their world, would be easy to manipulate. They had not counted on the fact that would talk to the other three champions. They had not counted on the possibility that a human would see patterns that they had hidden carefully for years. On the day that the council was supposed to announce the new protector, everything changed. And his three allies went to Queen Lyra together. This was against all protocol. No one was supposed to see the queen without permission from the council. But the others walked into her chamber anyway, and the guards did not stop them because was with them, and no one could stop. The queen was a tall woman with silver hair. She had ruled for 40 years and had learned to read people well. She looked at the three champions, and she asked them one simple question. "You have come to tell me about something dangerous." "Yes," said. "Two members of your council are planning to take control of the kingdom. We have proof." Showed her the documents that he had collected. He showed her the patterns in the decisions. He showed her the money that had been moved, the meetings that had been held in secret, the plans that had been written in code. The queen read everything carefully. Then she said, "If this is true, then the conspiracy is more advanced than I realized. If this is false, then you are all guilty of treason, and I will have to punish you according to the law." "We understand," said, "but we ask that you look at the evidence before you decide." The queen spent the next 6 hours examining everything that had brought her. She used her own advisors to check the information. She looked at the patterns from many different angles, and as she studied, her face became harder and more serious. Finally, she spoke. "The evidence is real. The conspiracy is real. 2 of my council members are planning to betray me and the kingdom. They are planning to take control by using the selection of the new protector as a way to build their military power." She stood up. She was still strong, even though she had ruled for 40 years. "You have saved my kingdom," she said to the 3 champions. "And you have done it by doing something that no one expected. You have united beings from 4 different species. You have shared information and built trust. You have solved a problem that none of us could have solved alone." But then she said something else, and this was important. "Now we must stop them from acting. We must be ready when they try to make their move." The queen sent a message to the council. She told them that the announcement of the new protector would happen at a state ceremony in 2 days. She told them that this would be a public announcement, with people from all the kingdoms watching. The council agreed, because they believed that this would give them time to prepare. What they did not know was that the queen had already moved her forces. She had already prepared her loyal soldiers. She had already made plans for what would happen when, and tried to use the announcement to seize power. 2 days later, the ceremony began. The great hall was filled with people from all 12 star systems. Beings of many different species sat in rows, waiting to see who would be named as the new royal protector. The queen sat on her throne, and sat on either side of her as they always did. They were confident. They were certain that their plan would work. The queen looked out at the crowd. Then she looked at the 4 champions. "I have come to a decision," she said. "The new royal protector must be someone who can protect the kingdom from all threats, from outside and from inside. The new royal protector must be someone who can build unity among different peoples. The new royal protector must be someone who can see danger that others miss." Then she pointed at, "I choose Dale." At that moment, everything happened at once, and stood up. They moved toward the queen, reaching for weapons hidden in their clothing, but they did not get far. The general was there in a second. His strength was so great that he simply pushed backward and flew through the air and crashed into a wall. The weapon in his hand fell to the ground. The warrior moved so fast that most beings did not even see him move. He took the weapon from his hand before she even knew what was happening. He held her in a grip that was gentle but unbreakable. Saren, the Xenos champion, had felt the moment of violence coming. His psychic powers had warned him, and he had already told the Queen's soldiers where to position themselves. Now those soldiers moved in and surrounded and they arrested them both. But the important thing was standing next to the Queen, calm and still. He was not celebrating. He was not showing anger or joy. He was simply present, watching, making sure that everything was happening the way that it should happen. The conspiracy was broken in less than 30 seconds. And it was broken not by strength or psychic power, but by a human's ability to see a pattern and to build trust between people who had no reason to work together. The Queen looked at, "You have saved my kingdom," she said. "And more than that, you have shown us something that we did not know. You have shown us that the future of our civilization might depend on things that we do not value. You have shown us that wisdom and unity are sometimes more important than power." She turned to the crowd. "All 4 candidates have done something important. All 4 have proven themselves worthy of the position. But only one of them saw the danger before it became a threat. Only one of them had the courage to speak the truth, even when no one believed him. This is why I choose Dale as the new royal protector of the kingdom." The crowd erupted in noise. Some were shocked. Some were angry. But many understood that something important had happened, something that changed everything. They chose the same human, and the kingdom's fate was sealed. Part 4: The Aftermath. The arrest of and sent shock waves through the kingdom. For 300 years, the council had been the stable center of their civilization. Council members were not supposed to betray the Queen. Council members were supposed to follow the law just like everyone else. But now 2 of them were in prison, waiting for a trial that would decide their fate. The trial lasted for 3 weeks, and tried to claim that they had done nothing wrong. They said that they were only trying to make the kingdom stronger, but the evidence was overwhelming. They had moved resources without permission. They had made deals with other species that benefited only themselves. They had planned to arrest the Queen and take control of the government. In the end, they were found guilty. They were exiled from the kingdom. They were sent to a distant planet where they would never have power again. But what happened after the trial was more important than the trial itself. The Queen called and the 3 champions to her chambers. She looked at all of them for a long time before speaking. "The council has asked me a question," she said. "They want to know if all 4 of you will continue to serve as royal protectors. They want to know if you will work together, instead of having only one protector." And the 3 champions looked at each other, then spoke. "I will serve," he said, "but I did not think I would ever work with warriors from other species. I was taught that we were rivals. This human has shown me something different." Nodded. "I also will serve," he said. "I have trained for 300 years to fight battles alone, but I have learned that sometimes the greatest strength comes from working with others." Saren smiled, a strange expression on a Xeno's face. "The human asked me to trust him even though I could not understand why," he said. "Now I understand. He trusted us first. This is the human way. This is why they are strong." Was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I will serve. And I ask that the Queen allow the 4 of us to stay together. We are stronger as a unit than we would be apart." The Queen agreed. She said that the 4 protectors would remain as a permanent force, protecting the kingdom and the Queen. But she also said something that changed the meaning of the job. "The royal protectors will no longer only protect the Queen," she said. "They will protect the unity of the kingdom. They will help the different species work together. They will be guardians of peace, not just guards of my life." After this meeting, something unexpected began to happen. Other species who lived in the kingdom started to notice the 4 protectors. They saw and Saren working together with. They saw that a human could be trusted by beings who were much stronger and much older than he was. Young warriors began to ask about what had happened, told them the story of how had trusted him enough to share dangerous information. The story spread through the community. Soon, began to see humans as something other than weak allies. The people heard how had learned to move with purpose beyond just fighting skill. They heard how had shown him that combat was not the only way to solve problems, began to teach other about this. He taught them that strength and wisdom were not the same thing, but that both were important. The Xenos had always been isolated, using their psychic powers to keep themselves separate from other species. But Saren began to speak about how had asked for help without using tricks or manipulation. He had simply asked, with honesty. Saren told other Xenos that this kind of honesty was something they did not have enough of. And humans began to arrive in the kingdom. Not many at first, but more each month. They were scientists and builders and teachers. They came because they heard that humans were being treated as equals, not as expendable allies. They came because had shown that a human could stand next to powerful beings and make a difference. 3 months after the trial, a young warrior named Volt came too. He asked if he could study how thought about problems. Agreed, and soon other young warriors from all the species were asking the same thing. Did not teach them to become warriors like him, because he was not a warrior. Instead, he taught them to observe, to think carefully before acting, to look for patterns that others missed. He taught them to ask questions instead of making assumptions. He taught them that cooperation was stronger than individual power. One day, the queen came to watch teaching. She stood in the back of the room and listened to him explain why the older ways of solving problems were not always the best ways. She listened to him say that different species had different strengths, and that the best solution to any problem was to use all of those strengths together. When the teaching was finished, the queen spoke to Alone. "Do you understand what you have done?" she asked. "I have tried to help, Sid." "You have done more than help," the queen said. "You have changed how we think about ourselves. You have shown us that strength is not everything. You have shown us that a human who is weaker than all of us can be the one who brings us together. You have asked a question that we should have asked long ago. What are we missing by not listening to each other?" 6 months after his selection as royal protector, stood in the Great Hall again. This time, it was not for a selection ceremony. It was for a celebration. The queen was celebrating the fact that there had been no conflicts between the different species for 6 months, the longest time of peace in the history of the kingdom. The queen looked at and the three champions. She said, "The other council members have asked me how this happened. They want to know the secret to peace. I told them that there is no secret. There is only trust, and trust only comes when someone is brave enough to ask for it and other beings are wise enough to give it." Felt something in that moment. He had not known that humans could feel such things, surrounded by beings who were stronger and older and more powerful than they were. But he felt it now. He felt that he had found a place where he belonged, not because he was the strongest or the most intelligent, but because he was willing to see what others could not see. And that, it turned out, was enough. They chose the same human, and the kingdom's fate was sealed. Part 5: The Kingdom's Future. 5 years passed, 5 years of peace, 5 years of change. The kingdom was not the same place it had been before arrived. The greatest change was in how the different species saw each other. They were no longer just warriors. They began to work on building projects with other species. They used their strength not just for fighting, but for construction. They built schools and hospitals and places where beings from different species could live together. They had always been fighters, but they became something more. They became teachers. Started a school where young fighters from all species could learn not just combat, but also strategy and thinking. His students included and Xenos, and even some humans who wanted to understand how to think like a warrior. The Xenos were no longer hidden away in their isolated communities. Saren traveled to different parts of the kingdom, helping to solve conflicts that arose between different groups. His psychic abilities were still powerful, but now he used them differently. He did not just sense danger. He helped beings from different species understand each other. He helped them know what the other was feeling and thinking. And humans continued to arrive. By the 5th year, There were 2,000 humans in the kingdom. They worked as teachers and engineers and doctors. They brought with them the human ability to improvise, to find solutions to problems that seemed impossible. They brought their way of thinking, which was different from the logical thinking of or the combat thinking of or the intuitive thinking of the Xenos. Did not become the most powerful being in the kingdom. He never developed superhuman strength or psychic abilities. He could not lift the weights that could lift. He could not move as fast as. He could not sense danger before it arrived like Saren could. But he had become the most trusted being in the kingdom. Young students studied his decisions. Teachers used examples from his life to explain how to think clearly about difficult problems. The general began to write books about strategies, about how he had seen the conspiracy when no one else could see it. The warrior wrote songs about his wisdom, not just his courage. The Xenos champion Saren used his psychic abilities to help other Xenos understand what made think the way he did. One afternoon was walking through the capital city with Queen Lyra. They passed through streets where workers were building a new building, where children were playing with human children, where Xenos merchants were selling food to shoppers. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not volunteered?" the Queen asked. "Every day," said. "I think about how much luck was involved. I think about how easily things could have gone wrong." "That is very human," the Queen said. She smiled. "You worry about things that have already happened and cannot be changed." They walked in silence for a moment. Then the Queen spoke again. "The other council members have been asking me about our future. They ask me what will happen to our kingdom in 50 years, in 100 years. They want to know if this unity will last." "What do you tell them?" asked. "I tell them the truth," the Queen said. "I tell them that I do not know. I tell them that for 3,000 years we believed that we could control the future through logic and planning. We believed that if we just thought hard enough, we could predict what would happen. But you have taught us something different. You have taught us that the future is not something we control. The future is something we create by the choices we make today." And the Queen stopped on a bridge that crossed over a river. Below them, water flowed in the direction it had flowed for thousands of years. But it was never exactly the same water. It was always changing, always moving, always finding new paths. "The question is not whether this unity will last," the Queen said. "The question is whether we will choose to build it every day. Every young who decides to help instead of fight. Every young who decides to teach instead of only train. Every young Xenos who decides to help instead of hide. Every human who comes here and brings their skills and their thinking. That is how unity is created, not through power, not through plans, but through choices." Nodded, he understood what she was saying. The Queen looked at him with eyes that had seen centuries of changes. "Do you know what the other species call you now?" she asked. "No," said. "They call you the bridge builder," she said. "They do not call you the protector. They do not call you the guardian. They call you the bridge builder because you showed them how to cross from one way of thinking to another. You showed them that different ways of thinking were not wrong. They were just different. And different thinking combined together made something stronger than any one kind of thinking alone." That night, sat in his quarters and thought about the past 5 years. He thought about how he had come to this kingdom as an ambassador, as someone trying to do a job. He thought about how he had seen a danger that others could not see. He thought about how he had asked for help, and about how 3 powerful warriors from 3 different species had said yes. He thought about the conspiracy and how it had been stopped not by strength, but by understanding. He thought about how the kingdom had changed because 4 beings had chosen to work together. And he understood something that the Queen had only hinted at. The council had chosen their protectors thinking that they were choosing the strongest candidates. They thought they were making a logical choice, but they had actually made a choice that changed everything. They had chosen a human who could see patterns. They had chosen a who could be convinced to think differently. They had chosen a who could learn that there was more than fighting. They had chosen a Xenos who could trust without using psychic power. and in choosing these four, they had chosen the future. 10 years after his selection, an old scholar came too. The scholar had been studying his decisions and his thinking. He asked a question. "How did you know?" the scholar asked. "How did you know to look for the conspiracy when no one else looked for it?" Thought about the question for a long time. Then he said, "I did not know anything. I just looked at the information that everyone else could see. I asked the questions that everyone else could have asked. I did something that humans are good at doing. I looked at what was in front of me and I asked what it meant. And then I did something else. I trusted other beings enough to share what I had found. That is all I did." The scholar looked disappointed. He wanted there to be something deeper, something more mysterious, but understood the truth that the queen had understood. There was no mystery. There was only the simple choice to look carefully, to think clearly, and to trust others. The kingdom would continue to change. It would face new challenges. There would be conflicts that and his companions would have to solve, but they would solve them the same way they had solved the first conflict. They would look for the truth. They would build unity. They would trust that different kinds of thinking, working together, could handle any problem. And that, it turned out, was all the kingdom really needed to become something greater than it had ever been.